Do you walk around aimlessly waiting for a more important person to interact with you? Do you stand in the same spot for hours, repeating the same action or phrase? Do you share a similar face with hundreds of other people? If so, you might be an NPC. NPCs, also known as non-playable characters, play an important role in crafting video game worlds. NPCs vary in importance from side characters to shopkeepers. However, in this video I will discuss the overlooked role of background NPCs in Cyberpunk 2077. To start, I want to classify the different types of NPCs of Cyberpunk. Firstly, we have named side characters. These are characters you frequently interact with throughout the story. Johnny Silverhand, Judy, and Panam are all examples of this first type of NPC. These NPCs provide the basis for the game's story. Secondly, we have enemies. These are NPCs that you are meant to engage in combat with. They often drop loot and are the focus of Cyberpunk's core gameplay. Finally, we have background NPCs. They have no narrative or gameplay purpose and can be likened to set dressing, seemingly no more important than the trees or rocks in the game. It's obvious why the first two types of NPCs are valuable. They provide the basis for the narrative and the gameplay. But narrative and gameplay aren't all there is to Cyberpunk 2077. There is a third element that, while often overlooked, is crucial to what makes Cyberpunk so fun. This element is immersion. While individually each background NPC isn't valuable to the overall game experience, collectively they provide invaluable immersion to the game. What I mean by that is that they create a game world that feels alive. It's what makes you feel like the world exists, despite the fantasy and sci-fi elements. But how do background NPCs do this? As I mentioned earlier, they can be considered decoration, but decoration goes a long way when making a video game. What I appreciate about Cyberpunk's NPCs is the variety of aesthetics that they can have. They of course have many different models, and they vary in their clothing, hair, and cyberware. But beyond that, there are differences in background NPCs' age. You can find those that look older, younger, and somewhere in between. Many games do not include children at all in the game world. This is usually because they don't want people who play the game to kill them, but I find that the inclusion of them as background NPCs makes the city seem more realistic. Also, it's worth noting that it's impossible to even aim your gun at the children NPCs in Cyberpunk. There is also a variety in the size of NPCs. Many games have all the NPCs fit onto a similar model, generally one for men and one for women, and they are all of average build. I like that Cyberpunk includes overweight, thin, average, and muscular NPCs for both men and women. It makes a lot of sense that a futuristic city run by corporations and vanity would still include people of all shapes and sizes. Finally, background NPCs will vary in their animations. There are several different postures they can have. They can walk confidently and tall, or slouched over while shuffling their feet. They can vary in how fast they walk. I like this because it keeps the crowd from looking homogeneous and robotic with their movements, adding even more to the realism. Adding all these elements together, you have nearly unlimited combinations when it comes to how NPCs can look. While all these details alone may not seem big, when taken together, it creates a city population with a lot of diversity and variance. Aesthetics alone doesn't create a living game world. NPC behavior also adds a lot to the immersion. There are two main types of background NPCs. The first type of background NPC stays in place. These NPCs generally stay in a very small area performing specific actions. For example, this NPC lives in an alley and spends his time eating beans from a can. These NPCs spend their time doing graffiti. These NPCs spend their time boxing each other. There are various actions that background NPCs can be seen doing. The second type of background NPC are the roamers. These NPCs walk constantly. They walk and walk all day long, making some stops but seemingly heading somewhere. The combination of these two NPC behaviors gives the city a sense of movement, making it feel like all these people are doing something or going somewhere. Finally, context and location are important for background NPCs. Night City has many districts, each with a unique aesthetic. There are the poor areas like Pacifica and the wealthy locales like Westbrook. These places are fundamentally different, so it makes sense that the people there would have to be different as well, and this difference is reflected in the NPCs. In Westbrook, near the luxury apartments, you can see NPCs with nicer clothes and more glamorous cyberware. However, near the hotel in Pacifica, you can find NPCs who look battered and rugged with black market cyberware. You can often tell what part of the map you are in just by looking at the surrounding NPCs, and this goes a long way towards establishing the world building and themes of the game. At first glance, Night City does appear alive, with a unique population that matches the setting. However, the illusion is not quite perfect. When taking a closer look, some cracks do begin to form. Beyond general bugs and glitches, you will find many NPCs that are exact replicas, even just a few feet away from each other. Also, About those roaming NPCs I mentioned earlier, they don't seem to be going anywhere. I followed one for about 20 minutes, and all she did was stop at vending machines a few times. Maybe it's a bit nitpicky, but I think adding more realistic paths, or at least places for the roaming NPCs to go, would make it seem a lot more believable. I understand most players aren't going to notice those kind of things, but I still believe it's worth the effort, as some do appreciate the finer details. With the combination of background NPC aesthetics, behavior, and location, Cyberpunk really creates a realistic feeling population, which allows you to better immerse yourself in the game world. I understand it's not perfect, but this is definitely a game design in the right direction. A contrasting example are the background NPCs in a game like Spider-Man. There's a lot less variety in the shape, size, clothes, animation, and behavior of the NPCs. Of course, this makes sense in the context of a game like Spider-Man, where you spend most of your time swinging between buildings and not walking on the ground. However, it shows the importance of background NPCs when it comes to designing your game world. Background NPCs are often overlooked and deemed unimportant in many games. However, I think the role they play in making a video game world immersive cannot be understated. In a world of cyber psychos, mercenaries, and powerful corporate CEOs, background NPCs are the one who make the world what it truly is.